Welcome, everybody, to today's Moments Off the Mat. I'm Cody Bickley. I'm USA Wrestling's National Team High Performance Manager, and joined today by our special guest, Mr. Mike Moyer, who is the Executive Director of the National Wrestling Coaches Association and has a long history, obviously, as administrator and even a coach in the sport of wrestling, coaching at the Division I level. And Mike, just really thanks for joining us today. And I know we've got some good discussion lined up and hope this helps provide a platform with really a lot of things that are going on out there in today's society.
Well, Cody, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Mike, I want to kind of back it up a little bit and let's start. The NCAA championships in the March of 2020 were going to be, something that was new, exciting, a lot of people in a football stadium. How many tickets can we sell? And then unfortunately that didn't happen. Can you kind of walk us through your involvement of how that started to progress in maybe late February or March and ultimately what came down to the decision? And then the second part of that, I would say, do you think it would go back? I know you've got a line of, cities lined up already. Do you think it would go back to that type of facility in the near future? So that's what I got for you.
Yeah, so the NCAA actually determines the site locations. There's an NCAA wrestling committee that works in tandem with the NCAA staff members, and they solicit bids from various cities around the country, and they sort of have a formula that they look at, and with a lot of input from the NCAA wrestling committee, determines where the locations are going to be. And, I can tell you that one of the biggest challenges of my job every day is the NCAA Division I championships, as we know, are sold out every year. And it's such a bummer when that phone rings from 7 a.m. till midnight with just diehard wrestling fans that are really looking to buy a ticket and get hotels to the NCAA championships, and they just can't. So this last year in Minneapolis, being in an NFL football stadium really solved all those problems. And it was just awesome that anytime that phone rang, we could accommodate those coaches. And of course, it's not just us, but all the different teams we have are selling tickets, and the Hall of Fame, and everybody works collectively to just make the championships the huge success that it really is. And I think everybody knew in the back of their mind that there was this very outside remote chance that the championships might not happen, but I don't know that anybody, myself included, could really fathom it really happening. And I think for me, the first time, I was actually on a plane, and I was on my way. I was going to go to the NCAA Division II championships at Augustana University, and then I was going to go to the women's NAIA championships up in Jamestown, North Dakota. And I got off the plane, rented the car, and I was a half hour out of Jamestown, and the call came in, so I figured, well, I might as well hang a left and head down to Augustana, and I got within 45 minutes there, and it was canceled. And wow. I think when it really started becoming a reality is when you were hearing, I think it was the NBA or the NHL. Yeah. I think it was the NHL suspended, and when that started happening, I think the reality set in, like, wow, this is for real. But I still couldn't fathom the NCAA basketball championships and all that goes in that. So I think in the very end, it was hard for all of us to really believe that the championships actually were canceled, but nevertheless they were. And we've been trying to navigate ever since.
Yeah. Wow. That's an interesting timeline you had there for sure. Getting those calls. That's who would have thought, for sure. I know how many times have we said that, but Mike, there was, I want to ask you too and get your thoughts and opinion. I was reading an article late last week or maybe even this weekend where the NCAA president talked about, really they want to have college campuses essentially up and running for classes. And if that's not the case, then essentially he said, I don't want fall sports occurring. So how does that play in? Have you heard anything on whether it's a certain percentage or that has to report back to campus, or what's your thoughts on hearing that news?
Well, what we're hearing back from our coaches is everybody's sort of handling it differently. The different schools different schools are looking through a different lens. I think it's possible that within a conference, some schools might be playing football in the fall and maybe some don't. You know, that's very possible. You know, one of the things we have a leadership group, a Division I leadership group, a Division II leadership group, Division III NAI, and so forth, and we have regular calls with those leadership groups are comprised of an elected coach from each of the conferences. And one of the things we had asked the coaches was does it make sense to at least float the idea to the NCAA now of possibly starting in January and just making the arrangements now so we're not caught off guard in October when we're all ready to grow. And you know, God forbid there's a second wave of this and we're not able to go. So, you know, clearly the NCAA has, you know, a lot of considerations going on, a lot more than we're aware of. But we have asked the NCAA, does it make sense to just consider trying to make that call sooner rather than later so it's less disruptive if we have to go in that direction. But as I said, there could be plenty of reasons out there where that's not even remotely possible that we're not aware of. But we did want to, on behalf of the coaches, float that idea out to our friends at the NCAA to see if it might be a possibility.
Yeah, that's interesting, and obviously you answered it. That was actually going to be part of my next question. I was going to allude into and have you talk upon. Do you feel that maybe this pushes? I know there's been some talk and on a one semester sport for collegiate wrestling, and unfortunately, can probably be put into a decision where it's not our decision maybe per se. Right? We're forced to have a condensed collegiate season or whatever it may look like. But obviously you answered that, and that's obviously you guys are well ahead of the game and they've already floated that out there. So that's interesting for to hear. Mike, I also want to ask you, just kind of looking at schedule a little bit. You guys obviously generally host NWCA convention that is held in for all levels of coaches in the summer. What's your guys' current status and plans with regards to your annual convention?
Yeah, great question. So just last week, we had made the decisions. We have a small group of infectious disease experts and researchers that we've been seeking a lot of advice from. Our annual convention is always the first weekend in August. We were, of course, asking the questions, what's the likelihood of that being able to happen and so forth. And based on all the information we got back, we made the decision that we really need to convert to a virtual convention for this year. Okay. And, we've never done anything like that. I've reached out to the other coaches associations. I haven't been able to find another coaches association that's tried this, so it's uncharted waters. But I will say this, one of our signature programs we have, it's a CEO Leadership Academy. We have one for college coaches and one for high school coaches. We put about 1,000 coaches, high school and middle school coaches, through the Scholastic version each year. They're in-person workshops that we host all around the country. And we really focus on the recruitment and the retention and recruitment from students from the hallways and the cafeteria, not obviously at the high school level, not recruiting from afar. But so what we've done is we've transitioned these in-person workshops. We had 8 of them scheduled this spring. We had to cancel them, and we have since transferred to a sort of these weekly online podcasts. And the response has been just unbelievable. I mean, it's the good news is we're reaching 2, 3, 4 times as many coaches. Admittedly, I think it's always better when you're in person. There's just the conversation over lunch or over dinner or even outside of the workshop itself. There's a lot of great information to get shared among peer coaches. But the trade-out is we can reach a lot more coaches. And so based on the incredible success we've seen of these weekly podcasts, we're going to go with a virtual convention and we're staying with the same presenters and the same topics, and we just, want to enjoy the potential upside of it is getting even a lot more participation. So
yeah,
the jury's out, but we're very optimistic. I think it'll be very successful. And the need for the convention is critical. There are so many incredible things that we need to celebrate as a wrestling community. but clearly there are some significant challenges. And, you know, the purpose of the convention is to provide a platform for all wrestling stakeholders to come together and problem solve. And there's just, particularly with everything that's going on out there, we just can't afford to not have the convention, not have this platform. So we're gonna make lemonade out of a lemon, and you know, hopefully have a great experience.
Yeah, great. Okay. Mike, I got to ask you, I guess in your role with as the NWCA executive director, I guess, what's your biggest concern or focus right now with this COVID-19 environment that we're living in within your role? I mean, what kind of keeps you up at night, so to speak?
Well, you know, our focus as an organization is really in three areas, three primary areas: coaching development. You know, we just believe that, and really coaches that are in and around the educational environment, primarily middle school, high school, and college wrestling coaches. And so we just believe that no one plays a more important role in the future of our sport than the head coach at every level. The second area would be kind of the student wrestler well-being focus. And, you know, an example of that would be the whole weight management reform that we've been intimately involved with going all the way back to 1999. And then the third area would be advocacy. And, you know, it's just recently we've helped to establish our 254th new college wrestling program, which is an incredible renaissance in our sport when you realize we lost over 550 college teams between 1972 and 1999. And in fact, we can say that more than 50% of all of our college wrestling programs that exist across the country right now have been established just in the last 20 years. So that's something that we really need to celebrate. And that's the result, not just of the NWCA, but of the Hall of Fame and USA Wrestling and all these wrestling stakeholders that are all doing their part to help grow this. And I might mention that we have 81 intercollegiate women's teams and growing. And we have a half a dozen new programs right on the cusp of adding, you know, programs right now. And so that's been incredibly exciting and rewarding. Where we are the most vulnerable is at the Division I level, because Division I level, the economics and the business model is very different at the Division I level than it is at Division II and III and NAIA. And what I mean by that is over the last 30 years, what has happened is student loan debt has really just spiraled out of control, and there's fewer and fewer students going to college. And so adding sports teams is a tried and proven cost-effective way for college presidents to grow in undergraduate enrollment, and particularly with good, strong students. I mean, there's books written about this. And so in a lot of ways, what we've been able to create at the non-Division I levels, so Division II, Division III, NAIA, junior college, is in a large way recession-proof, because the worse the economy, the more these college presidents need these sports programs to be wildly successful, you know, healthy rosters and those kinds of things. But at the Division I level, it's been up till now a very, very different business model. And I'll try to explain this in a simple way, although it's complex, but I'll do my best. Hopefully I do well enough to get invited back. But there's approximately 350 Division I athletic departments in the country. And of those 350, 130 of them are considered the wealthiest ones. And the reason they're considered wealthy is they have lucrative television contracts for their conferences. And that money gets shared with all the member schools. So we're talking primarily about the Power 5 conferences, which are like the Big 10, the Big 12, the ACC, you know, those programs. And then what they called the Group of 5. That would be like the MAC conference and Conference USA and the Sun Belt, Mountain West Conference, that next tier down. So to put things in perspective, last year, only about 30 of those 130 FBS athletic departments, these 130 of the wealthiest athletic departments, only about 30 of those athletic departments generated a profit last year. In other words, they brought in more revenue than they had expenses. But the other 100 of those wealthy Division I athletic departments, on average, receive an institutional subsidy of about $21 million. And that subsidy comes in the way of student fees and maybe some tuition revenue from other parts of the university. So what that tells you is that this Division I business model was broken long before COVID-19 hit. And what COVID-19 did is it just exposed it a lot earlier. And so, as one very prominent athletic director shared with me about, and this is of a Power 5 conference, he said, the Olympic sports that are going to have the biggest target on them are going to be the ones that cost the most money. And as great as our NCAA championships are, I mean, the idea that we could have had over 40,000 people for every round of the Division I championships, what we have to realize is the success of that event really doesn't help the athletic director solve his or her budgetary problems at the local level.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And so we have to make wrestling, Division I wrestling, as relevant as possible at the Division I level, on campus and in the community. It's not enough to say, wow, I got my 2 or 3 guys to the NCAA championships, I'm safe for another year. Because I could show you almost the last 15 Division I programs that have been dropped had either a historic or a near historic performance at the NCAAs within 2 years of being dropped. I'll tell you, Old Dominion had the most success at the national level than any other sport team in their athletic department in the last 15 years. If you just look at the NCAA championships.
Results.
And that's not an anomaly. I mean, again, we could go on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
So we really have to make sure that at all divisions, but particularly at the Division I wrestling, that wrestling is nicely aligned with the educational mission of a school. One, it's got to be relevant on campus and in the community. Number 2, we have to do really well academically. There's now, a lot of people don't know this, but this is the first year where there's an academic component that's been added to the NCAA revenue share model. So every athletic department has what they call an APR average. And that average has to be above a 985. I won't get into the weeds of what that means, but the average wrestling APR is a 975. And the athletic department has to be a 985. So we can't have a situation where we have a Division I wrestling program that is the reason its athletic department missed out on this money. The first year, it's been estimated that this money might equate to $50,000 for an athletic department. I mean, that's a lot of money, but not a lot of money. But by year 3, it could be north of $250,000.
Wow.
And it grows as the NCAA television contract, as the value of that increases. So it's really about making sure we are controlling the things that we have control over. And one of the things we've done as an organization is we've just released a self-assessment for Division I coaches to complete. Now, we're going to ask all coaches in all divisions to do this, but we started with Division I because it's where we're most vulnerable. And we have pre-populated this assessment tool with a lot of data that we already have that's publicly available. So it really doesn't require a whole lot of time and energy on the coach's part to fill in the blanks. But what we're really trying to do is to just make sure our coaches understand the things that matter and to make sure that there are enough things that we don't have any control over that can spell trouble for our sport and all other Olympic sports. We just can't afford to let our demise be something we otherwise have control over.
Yeah. No, you answered that great. I was once again kind of feeding into this stuff, and that was part of it. I know you have I've listened to you speak, you have a great model essentially that you guys have built to present enrollment-driven administrators or institutions on why it makes sense, essentially. And you bring up some great points there, and that was going to be.
So, Cody, if I could add one other thing, one of the new opportunities, believe it or not, is that a growing number of these Division I institutions are becoming enrollment-driven.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about the Ivy Leagues, and I'm not talking about the Power Five conference, the Big Ten, the Big 12. And I'm really not even talking about the Patriot League schools like Lehigh. But
Mhm.
for the most part, the other 200 Division I institutions out there are, in fact, many of them are becoming very tuition dependent. And if we have an appetite in wrestling for a level of Division I wrestling for more moderately funded programs, and I'm not talking for all programs. I mean, the programs we have competing at the highest level that are housed within athletic departments that have really healthy budgets and big television revenue, by all means, we want those programs to flourish and prosper and live happily ever after. But there are some incredible opportunities right now. If we can get past the idea that Division I wrestling should only be for programs at the highest level of funding. If we're comfortable, if our wrestling community has an appetite for this, we're having a lot of encouraging conversations with college presidents that are very interested in the incredible success we've had at Division II and III and NAIA. But they have to do it in a way that makes sense. So it doesn't help them, even if it's a break-even proposition. These presidents are trying to figure out where can we invest resources to create a good return on investment. And so a wrestling program, men's and women's wrestling program, can generate a lot of income for even a Division I institution if it can be funded in an appropriate way.
Right. Appropriate. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I don't want everyone to think this enrollment opportunity doesn't apply to Division I. It actually, there are a lot of Division I programs out there where we could get programs started, but there has to be a place where they can at least compete on a level playing field with other Division I programs that are moderately funded.
Right. Makes sense. Good. Mike, do you, I mean, obviously unique times, right? Once again, how many times have we heard that term lately? But do you feel in this environment, obviously that, right, almost in the sense that maybe it's a given answer, but our wrestling programs going to be, kind of forced to operate obviously different on obviously how they have in the past, and maybe if that's scheduling or on how they do things. I mean, are you starting to hear some things from coaches out there that are calling you saying, hey, Mike, this is what our athletic department is talking to me about? I'm just curious if you're getting some of those calls on maybe some things that are coming down the road. You talked about, you hit upon maybe a one semester having to go that direction and seeing it coming already. But are there some other things maybe that you guys have been kicking around or that you're hearing from college coaches?
Yeah, what's very eye-opening is I'm hearing this from coaches of those Power 5 conference schools. And when you recognize that these kinds of cost savings measures are being implemented at the Power 5 conference schools, you can only imagine what's happening as you get down to the FCS level, those mid-major and lower level Division I schools. It's an incredible opportunity to sort of reset intercollegiate athletics. I mean, if that's possible, it could create an unbelievably bright future for the Olympic sports at the Division I level, and even, I mean, for football and basketball as well. But this trajectory that we were on, even before COVID-19 hit, was not sustainable for the overwhelming majority of Division I schools. I mean, it was, I mean, for some of those Power 5 schools, I mean, they're generating a lot of revenue and they're doing just fine. But to a large extent, you have these mid-majors and lower level schools trying to mortgage everything they can to keep up with, those that are funded at the highest level. And it's not sustainable.
Yeah, understandable. Mike, there was, I know you were at the forefront of this, and this was when essentially the epidemic really kind of started to hit. There was a lot of stuff going on out there, and obviously, and one of them was, I know you were at the forefront of this and helping with this, there was a proposal that was brought forward from a certain, I think it was a certain conference group.
Group of 5.
Group of 5 conference.
5 of them.
with a recommendation that a Division I institution could, I think it was without NCAA approval, they could still lower the number of sports that they have to sponsor, which is 16, and still keep their Division I status. Is that correct? And can you fill us in a little bit on that proposal?
Sure. So for the FBS schools, and that's these 130 wealthy athletic departments we're talking about, they currently have an NCAA minimum requirement that they have to sponsor a minimum of 8 men's sports and 8 women's sports to be Division I. And when you get to the FCS level, it's the minimum sport requirement is 6 men's sports and 8 women's sports. So essentially what happened about 3 weeks ago, the conference commissioners of the group of 5 conferences actually submitted a request to the NCAA for a waiver that would have allowed them to fall below those minimums, and it would have been catastrophic for the Olympic sports. And so the NWCA is part of a coaches association coalition. There's like 4 coaches associations, kind of the steering committee. It'd be us, volleyball, swimming, and soccer. But we were able to get 20 coaches associations. Thankfully, USA Wrestling joined it, and we had a couple other entities, and we hired a PR firm. We launched just a massive targeted PR campaign. And at the end of the day, the NCAA Division I Council, which are essentially the athletic directors, conference commissioners, rejected the idea, and so did the NCAA Board of Directors, which are the presidents. But we still can't take our foot off the gas pedal, because a lot of those schools actually sponsor sports above that 16 minimum. So there's still room to drop sports and not go below that. The other thing I'll just mention, I know we're probably just about out of time, but another big threat that comes on the heels of that is the name, image, and likeness legislation that will, depending on what gets approved, the marquee intercollegiate athletes will be able to sell their name, image, and likeness. And that could impact the Olympic sports in a couple negative ways. The one way is if local corporate dollars start flowing to a handful of marquee football and basketball players and away from the intercollegiate athletic department, you can be assured that football and basketball aren't going to suffer, but it's going to be the Olympic sports that suffer from that. You're going to start seeing agents getting involved with high school athletes, in addition to the college athletes. And you're also going to see, I think, what could be an incredible recruiting advantage for those institutions that have such a corporate community that could start enhancing. Imagine if a recruit, in addition to a full scholarship, could start getting endorsements, and where that might go. So the NCAA is in a very challenging situation, because there's a concern that if they don't do something, Congress might do something. There's a lot of scrutiny, and so the next order of business for our coaches association is there an appetite to try to again, collaboratively through our coaches association coalition. Our perspective is, let's just go slowly and very, very carefully, and make sure that whatever is agreed upon isn't going to have negative consequences that could really impact the Olympic sports. And this is, I would say, this is at the top of the scale of risks. This is, and not just a risk to wrestling, but a risk to all Olympic sports, and something that we need to work very closely with, not just the Coaches Association, but governing bodies like USA Wrestling, the USOC, because you think of that farm system that the intercollegiate system is for the Olympic development program, and if you ever had to replace that, it'd be pretty expensive.
For sure. Yeah. No, great discussion there, Mike, and thank you for your time. You literally kind of hit all the points that I was wanting to make sure we get to today. So, with that, I just wanted to thank you, and I give you the last word on before we wrap it up today on anything that you have out there for the wrestling community.
Well, I would say this: tough times won't last, but tough wrestlers do. And of all these challenges we've talked about, none of them are such that we can't overcome them. But it really is going to take all the stakeholders working together. And it's going to require compromise, and it's going to require a lot of hard work. But we have a real opportunity to really position our sport to be wildly successful, even at the Division I level, much like we've had at the other divisions leading up till now. But with some intentional strategies,
Right.
the sky's the limit, and this is no time for us to run for the hills. Yeah, this is a time for big, bold, aggressive strategies to make sure we're well positioned for the challenges that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. Well, once again, thank you. I know in regards to that, you and I and some other administrators and coaches and athletes are going to be working on a committee that's been created, and we'll be releasing that stuff here shortly. So thank you for your efforts in that regard. And like you said, it's never an easy time right now that we're in, and some of those tough decisions and discussions have to occur so that really wrestling as a whole can survive, right?
Yep, correct.
Yeah. So, Mike, thanks once again. Appreciate your time today, and we'll definitely be talking soon. So, once again, Mike Moyer, Executive Director of the National Wrestling Coaches Association. Thanks again, Mike.
Thanks, Cody.